He came home early. The house was silent, empty. Then he heard voices coming from the backyard. He opened the door, and what he saw stopped his heart. His nanny was bathing his baby boys in a metal barrel. What he did next shocked everyone. Jason Nolan pulled into the driveway 12 hours early. Exhausted, defeated. He stepped inside. Silence. The kind that swallows you whole. No voices, no laughter. Just the echo of a life he'd been running from for 14 months. He loosened his tie, ready to collapse into his office and disappear like he'd been doing since his wife died. Then he heard something. Laughter. Faint. Coming from outside. He walked to the back door and opened it. What he saw stopped him cold. Hannah, his nanny, was kneeling in the grass beside an old metal barrel. His sons were inside, 20 months old, naked, splashing, giggling under the afternoon sun. The scene looked so peaceful it almost hurt to watch. Hannah looked up. Their eyes locked. Her face went pale. She opened her mouth to explain, but no words came. Jason didn't yell. He didn't storm forward. He just stood there, watching his boys happy in a way he hadn't seen since the day they buried their mother. Then he did something that would change everything. He set his briefcase down, rolled up his sleeves, and walked across the grass toward them. Before we begin, like this video, subscribe, and tell me where in the world you're watching from. If you've ever felt like you're just going through the motions, like you're alive but not really living, this story is for you. Let's begin. Hannah's hands trembled as Jason walked toward her. Every instinct told her to grab the boys, wrap them in towels, and run. But she couldn't move. Jason Nolan was her employer. A billionaire. A man who lived in a world she'd only ever seen from the outside. And she'd just been caught bathing his children in a metal barrel like some relic from another century. "Mr. Nolan, please," she started, her voice barely above a whisper. "The hot water's been out for 2 days. I called the property manager, but no one called back. I didn't want to bother you while you were overseas. May I help?" Hannah blinked. Jason gestured to the barrel, then started rolling up his sleeves. Slow, deliberate. She stared at him, unable to process what was happening. I don't understand." "May I help bathe my sons?" he said again, quieter this time. His voice cracked on the last word. Hannah's breath caught. This wasn't anger. This was something else. Something raw and broken that she couldn't quite name. Jason knelt down in the grass beside her. The knees of his expensive suit sank into the damp earth. He didn't seem to notice. David looked up at his father with wide, uncertain eyes. Daniel reached out one small, wet hand and touched Jason's cheek like he was checking to see if he was real. Jason's face twisted. Just for a second, like something inside him was breaking open. "Show me," he said softly. "Show me what to do." Hannah's hands were still shaking, but she nodded. "Support his back like this," she said, guiding Jason's hand under Daniel's tiny shoulders. "The water should be warm, but not too hot. Daniel doesn't like it in his eyes, so you tilt his head back a little just like that." Jason cupped water in his palms and poured it gently over Daniel's chest. The little boy giggled. Jason froze. His eyes filled. "When was the last time you heard him laugh like that?" Hannah asked gently. Jason didn't answer. He couldn't. Because the truth was he didn't know. He'd been so lost in his grief, so buried in work, that he couldn't remember the last time he'd actually stopped long enough to listen. David splashed, sending water across Jason's shirt. Hannah smiled. "He always does that. He thinks it's hilarious." Jason looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time since she'd started working here 7 months ago, he saw her, not as the help, not as the woman he paid to keep his children alive while he fell apart, but as the person who'd been holding his family together when he couldn't. "Thank you," he whispered. Hannah's eyes welled up. For what? For not giving up on them. The words hung in the air between them, and in that moment, something shifted, something neither of them could name yet, but it was there, fragile, tentative, like the first breath after you've been underwater too long. Jason stayed there in the grass for 20 minutes, learning how to touch his own children again. And when it was over, when the boys were wrapped in towels and giggling against Hannah's shoulder, Jason stood up. His suit was soaked. His shoes were caked in mud. He looked like a completely different man than the one who'd stepped out of that car an hour ago. "Tomorrow," he said. "Same time?" Hannah nodded, her throat too tight to speak. Jason walked back toward the house. But before he reached the door, he stopped, turned back. "Hannah?" "Yes, Mr. Nolan? Call me Jason." And then he disappeared inside. Hannah stood there, holding two sleepy boys, staring at the empty doorway, her heart pounding, because she had no idea what had just happened. But something told her everything was about to change. That evening, after the twins were asleep, Jason found Hannah in the kitchen. She was washing bottles at the sink, her back to him, her movements quiet and practiced. For a moment, he just stood there, watching. This woman had been in his home for 7 months. 7 months. And he'd never once asked her about herself, never asked where she came from, what her story was, why she stayed when 11 others had quit. He'd been too buried in his own grief to see her. "Hannah?" She turned, startled. "Mr. Nolan, is everything okay? Are the boys?" "They're fine. Asleep." He paused. "I was hoping we could talk." She set the bottle down slowly, her face uncertain. Jason pulled out a chair at the kitchen table and sat. "Please." Hannah hesitated, then sat across from him, her hands folded in her lap like she was bracing for bad news. "I need to understand something," Jason said. "The barrel. You've done that before, haven't you?" Hannah's eyes dropped to the table. "I grew up in Kensington," she said quietly. "North Philadelphia. The kind of neighborhood where pipes freeze every winter and landlords don't answer calls." Jason nodded, listening. "My mom died when I was 18, diabetes. She couldn't afford her medication." Hannah's voice was steady, but Jason could hear the weight beneath it. "My dad left when I was 6, so when Mom passed, it was just me and my 4 younger siblings. Terrence was 15, Isaiah was 12, Amara was 9, and Elijah, he was only 6. Jason's chest tightened. "The state wanted to split us up, different foster homes. I couldn't." Her voice cracked. "I couldn't let them be separated, so I became their legal guardian." "You were 18, Jason said softly. "I was a junior at Temple University, pre-med, full scholarship." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I had to drop out. Got 3 jobs, diner in the morning, cleaning houses in the afternoon, stocking shelves at night, but 4 kids in a 1-bedroom apartment? We were barely surviving." Jason felt something crack inside him. This woman, this young woman, who'd sacrificed everything, had been raising his children while still carrying her own family on her back. "Where are they now?" he asked. "With my aunt in West Philly. She's 72, on a fixed income. I send her $2,400 every month. Rent, food, school supplies. It's 60% of what you pay me." Jason stared at her. "That's why I live in the guest cottage," Hannah continued. "Why I eat dinner with the twins instead of going out. Every dollar I don't spend here keeps my family together." The room fell silent. Jason thought about the wealth surrounding them, the marble countertops, the designer appliances, the estate worth millions. And this woman who had nothing was holding 2 families together with her bare hands. "Hannah," he said, his voice rough, "why didn't you tell me?" She looked up, tears pooling in her eyes. "Because people like me don't ask people like you for help, Mr. Nolan. We just survive." Jason felt the words hit him like a punch to the chest, and in that moment, he realized something. He'd been so focused on his own pain that he'd been blind to everyone else's. But that was about to change. Jason stood and walked to the window, overlooking the darkened garden. The barrel was still out there, sitting in the grass like a quiet monument to something he couldn't quite name yet. "Tell me the truth," Hannah said softly behind him. 11 nannies in 6 months. What happened? Jason's jaw tightened. He'd never talked about this, not with anyone, not even his therapist, but something about the way Hannah had just laid her life bare in front of him made him feel like he owed her the same. "My wife died 14 months ago," he said, his voice flat. Clinical, the only way he could say it without breaking. "Brain tumor, glioblastoma. From diagnosis to death was 97 days. Hannah didn't speak. She just listened. The twins were 6 months old. Claire never got to see them walk, never heard them say her name." He paused. "The last thing she said to me was, 'Don't let your grief make you a ghost to our boys. They need you present, not perfect.'" He laughed bitterly. "I failed. Spectacularly." Jason turned back to face her. "I hired the best nannies money could buy, credentials from Yale, references from senators. But Daniel screamed 16 hours a day. David couldn't keep anything down. They had rashes, fevers, they wouldn't sleep. The first nanny quit after a week, said they needed medical intervention. The second lasted 3 days. Hannah's face softened with understanding. By the 6th nanny, the neighbors were filing noise complaints. Mrs. Patterson, 2 houses over, threatened to call child services. Jason's hands clenched. I was supposed to be this genius CEO, right? Built a company worth billions, but I couldn't figure out why my own children were suffering. So you ran, Hannah said gently. Jason nodded. I buried myself in work, 18-hour days, London, Singapore, Dubai. Anywhere but here, in this house that still smelled like her perfume. I convinced myself they were better off without me fumbling through fatherhood. That money could solve what I couldn't fix with presents. He sat back down, suddenly exhausted. By the time you arrived, I was ready to give up. Send them to my parents in Boston. Admit defeat. He looked at Hannah. The last, nanny number 11. She lasted 4 hours. 4 hours. She walked out and said, no amount of money is worth this. But the boys weren't the problem, Hannah said quietly. No, they weren't. Jason's voice cracked. I didn't know about the formula, or the propped mattress, or the music you played for Daniel at night. You just fixed everything I'd broken, and I never even asked how. Hannah reached across the table. Her hand hovered near his for just a moment before she pulled it back. You weren't broken, Jason. You were grieving. There's a difference. The words settled over him like a weight he didn't know he'd been carrying. I've been a ghost in my own home, he whispered, just like she warned me not to be. Then stop being one, Hannah said simply. Jason looked up at her. Tomorrow. We bathe them in the barrel again, and the day after that, and every day until you remember what it feels like to be their father. Something flickered in Jason's chest. Hope. Fragile. Uncertain. But there. He nodded. But neither of them noticed the shadow that passed by the kitchen window. Patricia, the estate manager, stood just outside the glass, her face twisted with something cold. She'd heard everything, and she didn't like it one bit. 6 weeks passed. Every evening at 6 o'clock, Jason came home. Not at 9, not at midnight. 6. He'd change out of his suit, roll up his sleeves, and meet Hannah by the barrel. The routine became sacred. Daniel and David would squeal when they saw him coming, their little arms reaching up like he was the best thing in their world. And maybe for the first time since Claire died, Jason was starting to believe he could be. You're getting good at this, Hannah said one evening, watching Jason confidently wash David's hair. I had a good teacher, he replied. Their eyes met, held. Something passed between them in that moment, something neither of them was ready to name. Hannah looked away first, her cheeks flushing. The boys love this time with you, she said softly. Jason nodded, but his throat felt tight, because the truth was he loved it too. These 20 minutes in the grass, with soap and water and laughter, had become the only part of his day that felt real. The only part that didn't feel like he was drowning. Inside the house, Patricia watched from the window, her jaw tight, her hands gripping the curtain. She'd worked for this family for 12 years. She'd been Claire's childhood friend. She knew what was proper, what was appropriate, and this, whatever this was, wasn't it? A billionaire kneeling in the grass with the help, laughing, smiling, looking at that girl like she was. Patricia's stomach turned. She'd already made some calls, planted a few seeds, let a few board members know that Jason's behavior was becoming concerning, erratic, that he was getting too close to the staff. That maybe grief had clouded his judgment. But watching him now, watching the way he looked at Hannah, Patricia realized words wouldn't be enough. She needed proof, something concrete, something that would make Jason see what a mistake he was making. Out in the garden, Jason lifted Daniel out of the barrel and wrapped him in a towel. The little boy nestled against his chest, warm and sleepy. Jason closed his eyes, breathing in the scent of baby shampoo and grass and summer air. Thank you, he whispered to Hannah. For what? For teaching me how to be present. Hannah smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes. You were always capable of this, Jason. You just forgot for a while. No, he said quietly. I didn't forget. I was afraid. Afraid that if I let myself love them fully, I'd lose them too. Like I lost Claire. Hannah's breath caught. But you can't live like that, she said. You can't hold back love because you're afraid of loss. That's not living. That's just surviving. Jason looked at her, really looked at her, and realized something that terrified him. He wasn't just learning how to be a father again. He was learning how to feel again. And Hannah was the one teaching him. The thought should have scared him, but it didn't. What scared him was the idea of her leaving, of waking up one day and finding her gone. "Promise me something," he said suddenly. Hannah looked up. "What?" "Promise me you won't leave." "Not without telling me first." There was something desperate in his voice, something vulnerable. Hannah hesitated, because the truth was, she'd been thinking about leaving, not because she wanted to, but because staying was starting to hurt in ways she didn't know how to handle. She was falling for him, for this broken, beautiful man who was learning how to live again, and that terrified her. Before she could answer, Jason's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his face went pale. "What is it?" Hannah asked. Jason looked up, his eyes dark with something Hannah couldn't read. "The board just called an emergency meeting." His voice was tight. "They want to discuss my fitness to lead the company." The board meeting was scheduled for the following afternoon. Jason barely slept. He sat in his study until 3 in the morning, staring at spreadsheets he couldn't focus on, his mind spinning with everything that could go wrong. They were going to question his leadership, his judgment, his stability, and maybe they were right to. He'd missed meetings, declined deals, left early, all for 20 minutes in the grass with his sons. But when 6 o'clock came the next evening, Jason didn't hesitate. He changed his clothes and walked outside. Hannah was already there, filling the barrel, the twins playing nearby in the grass. She looked up when she saw him. "Jason, you don't have to the meetings tomorrow. You should rest. I'm exactly where I need to be," he said quietly, and he meant it. They bathed the boys in silence, the routine as familiar now as breathing, but there was a heaviness between them, an unspoken fear. "What are you going to tell them?" Hannah asked finally. Jason watched David splash, his small hands sending water into the air. "The truth," he said, "that for 14 months I've been running, from grief, from fatherhood, from life, and that the only reason I'm still standing is because someone cared enough to hold my family together when I couldn't." Hannah's eyes filled. "They won't understand." "I know," Jason smiled sadly, "but I finally do." He lifted Daniel from the barrel, cradling him close. "Claire told me not to be a ghost, and I became one anyway. I thought success meant never stopping, never slowing down, never admitting I was drowning." His voice cracked. "But you showed me something different. You showed me that strength isn't about having all the answers. It's about showing up, even when it's hard, even when you're afraid." Hannah wiped her eyes. "What if they fire you?" Jason looked at her. "Then they fire me. But I won't apologize for choosing my sons. Not anymore." The words hung in the air between them, and in that moment, Hannah realized something that made her chest ache. She loved him. Not because he was a billionaire, not because of the estate or the wealth or the life he could offer, but because he was finally becoming the man he was meant to be. Broken, humble, present, real. "Whatever happens tomorrow," she said softly, "you're already a good father, Jason. They see that. Your boys see that." Jason reached for her hand. This time, she didn't pull away. Their fingers intertwined, warm and certain, while the twins played at their feet. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. But from the window, Patricia saw it all. And the next morning, she made a phone call. By noon, 3 board members had received an email. Subject line: "Concerning behavior, urgent review needed." Attached were photos. Jason and Hannah, hands clasped, kneeling together by the barrel. The caption read, "Is this the leadership Nextech deserves?" When Jason walked into the boardroom that afternoon, he had no idea what was waiting for him, but he was about to find out. The boardroom was cold. 12 faces stared at Jason from across the polished table. Men he'd known for years, built a company with, trusted, but today they looked at him like a stranger. Martin Crawford, the chairman, slid a folder across the table. "We've received some concerning information, Jason." Jason opened it. His stomach dropped. Photos, time-stamped, date-marked. Him and Hannah, by the barrel, laughing, their hands clasped. Him, kneeling in the grass in his suit. The boys splashing while they smiled at each other. Moments that had felt sacred, now reduced to evidence. "What is this?" Jason's voice was steady, but his hands weren't. "We're concerned about your judgment, Martin said carefully. Your relationship with your employee appears to have crossed professional boundaries, and your attendance record over the past 6 weeks has been— I leave at 5, Jason interrupted. To be with my children. Exactly. Another board member, Richard, leaned forward. You've declined 3 major acquisitions, missed investor calls, left meetings early, and now this. He gestured to the photos. Jason, we understand you're grieving, but this behavior is erratic, unstable. You're getting too close to the help. The help. The words hit Jason like a slap. Her name is Hannah, he said quietly, and she's not the help. She's the person who saved my son's lives when I was too broken to do it myself. The room went silent. Jason, Martin said gently, we're not saying she's not good at her job, but there are optics to consider. You're a public figure, a billionaire CEO, and she's what? Jason's voice cut through the room like steel. Say it. Martin shifted uncomfortably. She's a nanny from North Philadelphia with no credentials, no education, and these photos suggest you're involved with her. We're not involved, Jason said, though the words felt like a lie even as he said them. Then what is this? Richard tapped the photo of their hands clasped together. Jason looked at the image, at the peace on his face, the joy in his son's eyes, the first moment of real connection he'd felt since Claire died. That, he said slowly, is me learning how to be a father again. At what cost? Martin asked. Jason, the company is suffering. Your focus is divided. The board believes it may be time to consider removing me as CEO. The words hung in the air. No one denied it. Jason sat back in his chair, his mind racing. He thought about the life he'd built, the empire, the billions, everything he'd worked for since he was 20 years old. Then he thought about Daniel reaching for his face with wet hands, David's laughter, Hannah's quiet strength, the barrel in the grass that had become more valuable to him than every boardroom he'd ever sat in. You want to know what's really erratic, Jason said, his voice low and dangerous. Spending 14 months pretending to care about quarterly earnings while my children were suffering, working 20-hour days to avoid an empty house, hiring 11 nannies and never once asking why they all failed. He stood. Hannah Walsh has no degree, no credentials, but she diagnosed medical issues in my sons that professionals missed. She kept my family from falling apart when I couldn't. And yes, she taught me that my children need a present father more than they need a wealthy one. Martin's face softened. Jason, no one is questioning your love for your sons. But then what are you questioning? Your priorities. The word landed heavy. Jason looked around the table at men who measured success in stock prices and profit margins, men who'd never knelt in the grass, never bathed their own children, never had to choose between empire and presence. You're right, Jason said quietly. My priorities have changed. He turned toward the door. Where are you going? Richard demanded. We're not finished. Jason paused, his hand on the doorknob. Neither am I. And he walked out. But when he got home an hour later, the house was quiet. Too quiet. He found Harold in the garden, his face grave. Where's Hannah? Jason asked, his heart pounding. Harold's expression said everything. Patricia fired her, sir. 2 hours ago. Jason stood frozen in the garden. What do you mean she's gone? Harold's eyes were red. Patricia called her into the study, said her services were no longer needed. Gave her an hour to pack. Jason's chest tightened. Where is she now? I don't know, sir. She took her suitcase and left. She was crying. The words hit Jason like a fist to the gut. He turned and ran to the guest cottage. The door was open. Inside, the small room Hannah had transformed, with scraps of fabric and painted bottles, sat empty. Her few belongings were gone. But the curtains she'd sewn still hung in the window. The mobile she'd made for the twins still dangled above the bed. Like ghosts of the warmth that used to fill this space, Jason sank onto the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. What had he done? He'd walked out of that boardroom feeling righteous, brave. But he'd left Hannah unprotected, and now she was gone. From inside the main house, he heard it, crying. Daniel and David, screaming. Jason ran back inside. The twins were in their nursery, inconsolable. A new nanny, someone Patricia must have hired, stood helplessly nearby, her face flushed with frustration. I don't know what's wrong with them, she said. They won't eat, won't stop crying. Jason pushed past her and scooped both boys into his arms. They buried their faces in his chest, their small bodies shaking with sobs. "Mama," Daniel whimpered. "Mama." It took Jason a moment to realize they weren't calling for Claire. They were calling for Hannah. His sons had lost another mother, and it was his fault. Jason held them close, rocking back and forth, his own tears falling into their hair. "I know," he whispered. "I know. I miss her too." The new nanny shifted awkwardly. "Should I leave?" Jason said quietly. "You can go." She didn't argue. For hours, Jason sat on the nursery floor, holding his sons while they cried. No amount of money could fix this. No business deal could bring her back. He'd built an empire, but he couldn't protect the one person who mattered. When the twins finally exhausted themselves and fell asleep in his arms, Jason carried them to their cribs. He kissed their foreheads, his heart breaking. Then he walked downstairs. Patricia was in the kitchen, preparing dinner like nothing had happened. "Where is she?" Jason's voice was cold, controlled. Patricia looked up. "I'm sorry? Hannah, where did she go?" Patricia set down her knife. "Mr. Nolan, I understand you're upset, but that girl was inappropriate for this household. She was. You had no right." "I had every right," Patricia said firmly. "I'm the estate manager, and that woman was overstepping, getting too familiar. I saw the photos, Jason. Everyone did. She was taking advantage of your grief." "Stop." Jason's voice cut through the air like glass. "Hannah Walsh gave up everything to care for my sons. She worked 3 jobs to raise her siblings. She dropped out of university. She sacrificed her entire life for people she loved." His voice shook. "And the only person taking advantage of anything is you." Patricia's face went pale. "You're fired," Jason said quietly. "Pack your things and leave my house." "Jason, you can't." "I can. And I am." He turned toward the door. "You're making a mistake," Patricia called after him. "Choosing her over everything you've built, over your reputation, your company." Jason stopped, looked back. "No," he said. The mistake was waiting this long. He grabbed his keys. He had to find her. Before it was too late, Jason drove through the darkening streets of Fairfield, his mind racing. He didn't know where Hannah lived, didn't have her phone number. He'd never asked, never thought he'd need to. The realization made him sick. He pulled over and called Harold. "Do you know where she went?" Harold hesitated. "She mentioned something about staying with a neighbor, Mrs. Alther, 3 doors down from the estate." Jason's heart pounded. He turned the car around. Mrs. Alther's house was small, modest. The porch light flickered as Jason pulled up. He knocked. An elderly woman answered, her face wary. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for Hannah Walsh. Please. I need to speak with her." Mrs. Alther studied him for a long moment. "She doesn't want to see you." The words hit harder than Jason expected. "Please," he said, his voice breaking. Just tell her I'm here. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell me yourself." Jason turned. Hannah stood at the end of the porch, her arms wrapped around herself like she was holding herself together. She looked exhausted, heartbroken. Mrs. Alther quietly slipped back inside. "Hannah," Jason breathed. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice hollow. "I fired Patricia." Hannah blinked. "What?" "She had no right to let you go. None. And I told her to leave." Hannah shook her head. "Jason, you can't just... This isn't some business deal you can fix with money or power. I was humiliated, treated like I was nothing, like I didn't matter." "You matter," Jason said desperately. "You matter more than anyone." "To who?" Hannah's voice cracked. "To the board who thinks I'm taking advantage of you. To Patricia who called me the help, or to you when it's convenient. That's not fair." "Isn't it?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Jason, I fell in love with your sons. I watched them grow, held them when they cried, and today I had to leave them without even saying goodbye. Do you know what that feels like?" Jason stepped closer. "Yes, I do." Hannah looked up at him. "I lost Claire without getting to say goodbye," he said, his voice raw. "And today I almost lost you the same way. And I can't do that again, Hannah. I can't lose someone else. He stopped. The words hung between them, unfinished. Hannah's breath caught. "Someone, you what?" she whispered. Jason looked at her really, looked at her, and knew there was no going back from this. Someone I love. The silence that followed felt eternal. Hannah's eyes filled with fresh tears. You don't mean that. I do. Jason's voice was steady now. Certain. I love you, Hannah. Not because you saved my sons. Not because you taught me how to be a father again. But because you saw me at my worst, broken and lost and running from everything, and you didn't give up on me. Jason. Her voice was barely a whisper. I'm not asking you to come back as the nanny, he said. I'm asking you to come back as family. Because that's what you are. That's what you've always been. Hannah covered her mouth with her hand, overwhelmed. What about the board? Your company? Your reputation? Jason smiled sadly. I walked out of that meeting today, told them my priorities had changed. He stepped closer. And they have. You and those boys, you're my priority now. Everything else is just noise. Hannah looked at him through tears. What if this doesn't work? What if? Then we'll figure it out, Jason said. Together. He reached for her hand. This time, she let him take it. Come home, he whispered. Please. The boys need you. I need you. Hannah's resolve crumbled. She nodded, tears streaming down her face, and when Jason pulled her into his arms, she finally let herself believe it. That maybe broken people could heal each other. That maybe grief didn't have to be the end of the story. That maybe, just maybe, love could grow in the cracks. But neither of them knew what waited for them when they got back to the estate, or how much everything was about to change. When they pulled into the driveway, the house was dark except for one light. The nursery. Jason and Hannah walked inside together. Harold met them in the hallway, relief washing over his face. The boys, he said quietly. They won't sleep. Jason nodded and led Hannah upstairs. Daniel and David were standing in their cribs, faces red and tear-stained. But the moment they saw Hannah, everything changed. Mama! Daniel reached out, his whole body straining toward her. Hannah's breath caught. She crossed the room and scooped them both into her arms, sinking to the floor as they clung to her. I'm here, she whispered, her voice breaking. I'm here. I'm not leaving. I promise. Jason knelt beside them, wrapping his arms around all three. And in that moment, on the floor of a nursery filled with toys and moonlight, a family that had been broken began to heal. Not because everything was perfect, but because they chose each other. 2 years later, the barrel still sat in the garden, but now it was polished, painted with yellow daisies that 4-year-old Daniel had helped Hannah add. Jason stood beside it, holding their daughter Grace Claire Nolan, 6 months old, wrapped in a soft towel. Daniel and David ran across the grass in matching shirts, laughing as Harold chased them with a water hose. Hannah walked out carrying a blanket, her wedding ring catching the October sun. They'd married in this garden a year ago. No press, no society guests, just family. Terence had stood beside Jason as best man, fresh from graduating community college. Isaiah and Amara had walked Hannah down the aisle, and Elijah, now 13, and dreaming of veterinary school, had held the rings. Ready? Hannah asked, settling beside Jason on the grass. He nodded. Together, they lowered Grace into the same barrel that had changed everything. The baby's eyes widened, then she gurgled with delight, her tiny feet kicking. Daniel and David rushed over, helping pour water gently over their sister's head. Careful, Hannah instructed, guiding their hands. Just like we practiced. Jason watched his family, his whole, beautiful, imperfect family, and felt his chest tighten with gratitude. The board had voted to keep him as CEO after all, not because he'd changed his priorities, but because his company had never been stronger than when he learned to put his family first. The Barrel Project, the non-profit they'd founded together, now served over 1,000 families across 3 cities. Every Saturday, Hannah ran programs while Jason played with the kids, his sleeves rolled up, his hands dirty, building something that mattered more than profit margins. But it was these quiet evenings in the garden, that Jason treasured most. Your mama would have loved this, he whispered to Grace, his eyes wet. Hannah rested her head on his shoulder. She knows, she said softly. Somehow, I think she knows. Daniel splashed, sending water across Jason's shirt. Jason laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from deep in your chest, where healing lives. You know what I realized, he said to Hannah. What? That barrel saved my life, not because of the water or the ritual, but because it taught me that the most valuable things can't be bought. They have to be built, one day at a time, with dirty hands and humble hearts. Hannah smiled through tears. And sometimes, she added, God uses the most broken moments to bring us exactly what we need. Jason kissed her temple. Grace laughed in the barrel, surrounded by her brothers and the people who loved her. And somewhere above them, in the golden light filtering through the oak trees, it felt like Grace itself was smiling down. Because this was never just a story about a nanny and a billionaire. It was a story about showing up, about choosing presence over perfection, about kneeling in the grass and letting love, messy, humble, redemptive love, teach you how to live again. And sometimes, that's exactly what a miracle looks like. A metal barrel, soapy water, and a family brave enough to start over